Denver, Colorado. A Wednesday morning in late May, 7:52 a.m. The clinic was a long, narrow building on the edge of the Highland neighborhood, and on Wednesday mornings, it had a particular quality of quiet. The front desk not yet at full speed, the treatment rooms just beginning to fill. Jenna Holloway had been working here for 6 years. She knew the building by its sounds, the way you know a person by their breathing. The creak of the third exam room door, the hum of the ultrasound machine warming up in the back, the way morning light moved across the whiteboard with the day's patient schedule. She was in room 2 with a 26-year-old named Tyler Chen, serious runner, torn hamstring march. He had the quality that serious athletes often had, a high pain threshold that made him unreliable about his own body. Not the injury. The injury was manageable. The tolerance was the thing to watch. She guided his hand to the place just above the knee, on the lateral side, the place he wasn't noticing. Feel the difference when you extend between the left and the right? He said he kind of felt it, said the right felt a little tight. That tightness is a signal. What does it mean? He said that it's still healing, that it's asking for attention before it becomes a problem. Your body is telling you something before it needs to shout. The mistake most people make is they wait for it to shout. By then, you're starting over instead of adjusting. She said this several times a week, in different forms, to different people. The body speaks early. The signal comes before the crisis. She had gotten good at teaching people to hear it. She was not thinking about herself when she said it. She was not thinking about the last 8 weeks. She finished the session, wrote her notes, moved to the hallway. He used to ask about her patients by name. This was the thing she kept not thinking about. When she allowed herself close to it, which happened most often in these early morning rooms, in the particular quiet of a patient getting settled on the table, she would come near it and then find a reason to go somewhere else. She was good at finding a reason to go somewhere else. But the fact of it, 4 years with Connor Price, and from the first few months onward, he would ask, specifically, Mrs. Kowalski, the 71-year-old retired postal worker who had torn her rotator cuff and was training at 71 for a charity walk in September, the teenager who had blown his ACL 3 weeks before state championships, the woman in her 40s, Patricia, who had been told by 2 other PTs that her recovery ceiling was probably 40%, and who Jenna had gotten to 62. He remembered them. He asked about them. He would come home and say, "How's the ACL, kid?" And she would tell him, and he would listen the way almost no one listens, not waiting for the pause to respond, just actually tracking it, actually being in the room with it. And she would feel afterward that her work mattered not just because she knew it mattered, but because someone else had witnessed it mattering. That was what she kept not thinking about. She moved to room 4. Her 745 was Angie, a retired high school science teacher, early 50s, knee replacement in February. Angie had opinions about everything and delivered them at a moderate pace with genuine warmth. Jenna had grown over the months to look forward to her Wednesdays. Near the end of the session, Angie said conversationally that her daughter had called the night before. 4 hours. She'd forgotten how good it felt to talk to someone who actually wanted to hear what you were going to say next. Jenna noted the range of motion data. She said, "That's a good feeling." She did not let the sentence land. The 3 things had happened over 8 weeks. She had not yet called them things, not to herself. She had referred to each of them separately under more specific names. The first was Connor being tired. The second was an odd moment she'd probably misread. The third was a hard conversation that came out of nowhere and became somehow her fault, and she was still not entirely sure how. She had not yet placed them side by side. She would, eventually. The first was a Tuesday in late March. They had gotten into the habit in the first 2 years of cooking together on Tuesday nights. The habit had shifted somewhere in year 3 to Jenna cooking and Connor appearing from the home office around the time the food was ready. She had not noticed the shift happening. She noticed it now only from this distance. The way you notice furniture has been rearranged only after you've lived with the new arrangement long enough to remember the old one. He came in from the office while she was plating. He kissed the back of her head. He got a glass of water. He sat down. She began telling him about Patricia. Patricia Dunmore had walked, unassisted, without the cane she'd been told she would need indefinitely, for the first time in 4 months. 11 steps from the exam table to the door. Jenna had been there. She had been there for a lot of moments in the course of her work, but this one was the kind you didn't forget. The way Patricia's face had looked when she realized what she was doing. The sound she made, which was not quite a laugh and not quite a cry, but something that came from a layer below either. She was halfway through it when she noticed Connor's phone was on the table. The phone appearing at dinner had happened before, and she had formed over the months a theory about it. He was monitoring a work situation, he would explain later, some deliverable that couldn't wait. The theory was probably correct. She applied it now and kept talking. She was describing the sound Patricia made, that not quite laugh, not quite cry. And she looked at Connor, and he was typing, not glancing, typing. She stopped. He kept typing. The pause in her voice did not register. She watched him for a moment, 6 seconds, maybe 8. And then he put the phone down and said something. About the Friday meeting, about a data set that wasn't aligning, about the account manager on the Denver team who had dropped a ball 3 weeks running. She listened. She said, "That sounds frustrating." "Yeah, it is." "Sorry, how are you doing?" he said. She said, "Good. I had a good day." She did not mention Patricia again. She helped herself to more food and listened to the data set situation and thought, he's under a lot of pressure right now. She understood pressure. She had bad weeks at the clinic too. She understood. She did not think about the fact that she had stopped speaking and he had not noticed she had stopped speaking. She thought about it only later. She did not call it anything. The second was a Sunday morning in mid-April. They had been in that particular domestic Sunday rhythm, late coffee, no plan, the kind of morning that in the first 2 years had the quality of gift wrapping, of found time. Connor was making eggs. Jenna was on the couch with her phone, reading something she would not later remember. "Emma from the team might get the Greenway account," he said. "That would be a big deal for her." Jenna looked up. "Who's Emma?" "From the analytics team. Newish. She's been on the Greenway project. She's pretty sharp." He smiled slightly at the eggs. Something light in the smile, something unburdened. "That's good. Is she senior level?" He made a small sound that might have meant yes or might have meant it's complicated. He changed the subject. The eggs were ready. What did she want on hers? She chose her toppings. They ate. An hour later, both of them in their Sunday corners of the apartment, Jenna on the couch, Connor at the kitchen table with his laptop, he said without context, "Emma's going to have to travel to the client site if the account closes. Probably 2 weeks in Chicago." Jenna looked up from her book. "That's a big commitment." "She'll handle it. She's built for that kind of thing." He said it with a particular quality in his voice. Not warmth exactly, something lighter than warmth, something with a slight distance from where Jenna was sitting. She looked at her phone. She thought, he's been in the office a lot lately. It makes sense that he'd have work on his mind. Work people. She thought, Emma from the team. She did not think about it after that. She thought about it for the rest of the day. The third was a Thursday night in early May. They had eaten dinner separately, her late shift, his long call that went until 8. They were in the living room by 9, both of them with something to read, not talking much. She had been trying to say something, not about Emma, not about the Tuesday dinner, not about anything specific, just to be in conversation, just to cross the quiet that had settled between them like furniture she couldn't move. She had tried twice. He'd responded. Short. Adequate. Returned to his book. The silence grew. She was thinking, this is just what 4 years looks like sometimes. She was thinking, we've had quiet weeks before. She was thinking, I should not be so sensitive. She was starting to think, and she did not like that she was starting to think this, that she was the problem, that she was reading into things, that she was, in some way she couldn't precisely name, making the quiet into something it wasn't. She was almost all the way into that version of herself when Connor put his book down. He looked at her. His face was open, concerned, the particular face of someone who is about to say something difficult out of genuine care for you. "Can I say something?" he said. "Yeah." He paused the way you pause before saying something you've been holding for a while. "You've been really hard to be around lately. I don't know if you've noticed that. I'm not saying this to upset you. I'm just worried about you." Jenna felt the air leave the room, or leave her, leave some central place inside her that had been trying to hold things steady. I've been hard to be around? Not in a bad way, there's something closed off, like you're here but you're not really here, and I know you've been busy. I know the clinic's been a lot, but I want us to be okay. I'm just checking in. He said it the way you'd say it to a friend who was struggling, with gentleness, with genuine sounding care. Jenna heard herself apologizing before she was entirely aware she was going to. "No, I'm sorry, you're right. I've been in my head. I'll work on it." He reached over and squeezed her hand. He picked up his book. She picked up hers. She spent the next hour on page 73, reading the same paragraph. She thought, he noticed something. He cared enough to say something. That is a good thing. She thought, I need to be more present. She thought, it's my fault we've been off. She did not question the framing. She had accepted the diagnosis before examining the data. The next morning was a Friday. Jenna had 2 hours between noon and 2, a rare gap usually used for documentation catch-up. She was in the hallway moving toward room 3 when Melissa Okafor caught her at the supply closet junction. Melissa was 30, had been Jenna's PT assistant for 2 years, and had the difficult quality of seeing things clearly without being certain what to do about what she saw. "Hey, are you okay?" "Yeah, why?" "I don't know. You seem like you're somewhere else today, like you're running on backup power or something." Jenna almost laughed. The description felt oddly precise. "I didn't sleep great. It's fine." Melissa looked at her for an extra second, not in a way that pressed, just in a way that held. Then she nodded and moved down the hallway. Jenna went into room 3. She thought about the phrase backup power, the difference between running and running on backup. She thought about it for approximately 90 seconds. Then her next patient came in, and she let it go. Andrea Cross called on Saturday morning at 11 from Boulder. They video called every 2 or 3 weeks. This one was overdue. Jenna had not called first because she wasn't sure exactly what she would say if she did. Andrea appeared on screen in her kitchen. Behind her, the south-facing windows, morning light, the particular brightness of Boulder that Jenna had quietly envied since Andrea moved there 3 years ago. Andrea was 46, and she had the specific quality of someone who had been through a war and stopped pretending wars weren't real. They talked about the usual things first. Jenna's sister's new apartment in Fort Collins, Andrea's build project in Loveland, which had been complicated for months and recently become less so, Andrea's youngest finishing sophomore year and developing unexpectedly an interest in woodworking. Then Andrea said, "How are things with Connor?" Jenna had been waiting for the question. She had been preparing not a lie, but a version. Enough to be honest, not enough to invite scrutiny. She was not sure she was ready for what scrutiny might find. "He's good. Work's been intense. We've had some quiet weeks. Quiet weeks as in less connection. He's been stressed. The project he's on is a big one. Andrea said nothing for a moment. She had the specific expression of someone who has learned to say nothing at exactly this kind of moment. What does a quiet week look like for you two? I don't know. He's on his phone more. We talk mostly about his work stuff. It's not bad, it's just I feel like I've been less interesting to him lately. What do you mean? He doesn't ask anymore about my patients. He used to ask about specific patients by name. He remembered things I said, and now that's not happening, which is fine. People go through phases. I know I go through phases too. She heard herself qualifying before she'd finished the sentence. When did it start? Andrea asked. What? The not asking. When did it actually start? It's been gradual. I noticed it most a few weeks ago. I was telling him about a patient who walked unassisted for the first time in months, a big moment for her, and he was on his phone. He didn't notice I stopped talking in the middle. Andrea was quiet. On screen, her face was still, the kind of still that is not blank. He didn't notice you stopped, she said. He was probably dealing with something from work. There was a situation with the data set. He explained it after. Okay. What? Nothing, I'm just listening. You said quiet weeks, plural. Is there other stuff? Jenna thought about Emma, about the name and the smile, the slight, unburdened quality of it, which she had decided not to let be a thing, which had remained faintly a thing. He mentioned someone from work, a colleague, Emma, twice in the same morning, that's nothing. He works with people. What was the second time? He was talking about her travel schedule if a project closes. I asked a completely normal question about it, and he just changed the subject, which I don't know. I was probably overthinking. What was the question? Just if she was senior level, a nothing question. Andrea shifted on screen. She reached for her coffee. She held it without drinking. Okay, is there more? Jenna thought about Thursday, the way Connor had put his book down, the particular expression, genuinely caring, genuinely concerned, the way it had felt to apologize before she understood what she was apologizing for. He said something to me on Thursday. He said I'd been hard to be around lately, that he was worried about me. He said you were hard to be around. He said it in a kind way, like he was checking in. How did you feel when he said that? I apologized. I said I'd been in my head and I'd work on it. Andrea was very quiet. This was a different kind of quiet from her usual quiet. This was the quiet of someone holding something very carefully. Jenna. What? Can I ask you something? And I need you to hear it before you explain it away. Okay. When did he stop asking? I already said, a few weeks ago. It was gradual. Not this week, not the dinner. When was the last time you remember it feeling like before? The last actual time? Jenna opened her mouth. She started to say something. She stopped. She went backwards. Past the dinner in March, past February, which had been fine, she had told herself it was fine, past January, which she now remembered as having a particular quality of distance she had attributed at the time to the new project Connor had started in December. She went back, she could not find it. I'm not sure. That's okay. It's been a while, but that doesn't mean, I know, I'm not saying it means anything. Which meant, and they both knew it meant, something. They talked for another 20 minutes about the Boulder project, about Jenna's sister, about the summer. Andrea was warm and did not push. She asked questions and listened to the answers. She did not name what she was thinking. At the end, she said, "Let's talk again soon, okay?" Jenna said, "Yeah, okay." She put the phone down and sat for a while. The following Friday, Connor went out. Happy hour with the analytics team. He had mentioned it midweek. She had said, of course, have fun. She had meant it. This was not the kind of thing she kept track of, and she did not start now. The apartment was quiet in a way it was not usually quiet. She made herself dinner, the pasta she liked that Connor found too heavy, and sat at the table without turning on the television. The quiet was not uncomfortable. The apartment was, in some specific way she did not want to examine, more inhabitable tonight than in the quiet they occupied together. She ate. She thought about Andrea's question, not the soft version she'd been carrying since Saturday, not when did it get quiet, but the specific form of it. When was the last time it felt like before? She tried again to find it. She went back through the year. January. Connor had started the Greenway account. He was excited about it. This would define his review cycle, he'd said. She had been proud of him for it. November, October, September. She went backwards, and somewhere in the fall, she could not pinpoint it exactly, the texture changed. Not a specific event. A change in density, a shift in the material of his attention, like the difference between wool and wool blend, which you only notice when you're cold enough to need it. In November, she had told herself, it's the review cycle. In September, we've been adjusting. The new furniture arrangement takes time. She had been making up reasons for months, not lying to herself exactly, applying available explanations to available data. She was trained to do this, to look at a symptom and find the most likely cause. Usually, it was the most likely cause. She sat at the kitchen table and thought, what if the explanations are wrong? The thought lasted approximately 4 seconds before her mind brought forward a counter-argument. Long relationships cycled. She'd been tired lately. She wasn't exactly bringing her best self home either. There it was again, the pivot, the rotation back to herself as the likely problem. She had been doing this for months. She had not, until this Friday night with her pasta and the empty apartment, noticed how automatic it had become. She sat with it a while longer. She picked up her phone. She looked at Andrea's name. It was 9:45 on a Friday. Too late to call, probably. She put the phone down. She stared at the wall. She thought about Tyler Chen and his hamstring, about the thing she said several times a week to patients who kept waiting for something to shout before they believed it was worth paying attention to. The body speaks early. The mistake is waiting for it to shout. She did not sleep well. The second call was a Sunday evening. Jenna had asked, which was unusual. She was usually the one who waited for Andrea to initiate. She had not noticed that pattern until this week. Andrea answered on the second ring. Her living room now. Evening light, the amber color of Boulder in late May. Hey, I'm glad you called, Andrea said. Yeah, I had more to say. After last time, I figured you might. A short pause. The kind that is actually a clearing of space. I've been thinking about what you asked. When did it start? And I went backwards all week and I can't find it. I can't find the last time it felt like before. And it's been longer than I told you. I think it's been since the fall. Since the fall, Andrea said quietly. I kept explaining it away. November was the review cycle. September was adjustment after we rearranged the apartment. I kept finding reasons and applying them, and I'm good at that. The reasons were always plausible. They always are. There was something in the way she said it that landed differently than a general observation, like it had a specific address. What happened with Marco? When you realized, how did you know? Andrea held her mug. She looked at something off screen for a moment. I didn't know at the time, that's the thing. I had 100 explanations. His mother's health, the business stress, a phase, an adjustment. I had an explanation library. Yeah. What I actually remember as the last time it felt like before was late November, 8 years in. We were at a restaurant in Denver and Marco asked about the Loveland project. He knew every detail, who the client was, what my concern was about the subcontractor, the thing I was nervous about presenting. He had retained all of it, and I remember thinking, this is what it feels like to be known. Okay, that was 6 weeks before the end. 6 weeks before it became very clear, very fast. And when I went back after, when I could actually look at the arc of it, I realized that what I had experienced as being known was Marco retaining information about me. Which sounds the same, but it is not the same. What's the difference? Someone who loves you is curious about the changing version of you. Not the stored version, not the version they can refer back to and seem impressive about. The ongoing version. The you who changes every week because you're actually alive. Marco was extraordinary at retention. He was not curious about who I was becoming. He was attached to the version he had. Jenna was quiet. She thought about Connor asking about Mrs. Kowalski, the ACL teenager, Patricia, the richness of his attention in the early years, the way it had felt like being studied by someone who loved what they were studying. She thought about the moment at the dinner table when she stopped talking and he kept typing. He had stored who she was, the version that made sense to him, and when who she was began to include someone with her own exhaustion and her own need for space inside the conversation, he had been in some quiet way inconvenienced by the discrepancy. He used to ask, everything, every detail, and then at some point, the image he had of you stopped matching you, Andrea said. What? Andrea set her mug down. She leaned slightly forward on screen. This was the Andrea that Jenna had seen before, 2 years after the divorce, over wine. The Andrea who had stopped being diplomatic about certain things because she had paid the price for the diplomacy. Jenna, can I tell you something I wished someone had told me? Yeah. Jung had a name for what happens at the end of these relationships. He called it the withdrawal of projections. The idea is that when we fall in love with a certain kind of person in a certain kind of relationship, what we fall in love with first is actually a projection, an image we place onto the other person, and for a while the person fits the image, or we fit the image they place on us. I don't understand. Connor saw something in you at the beginning that he needed to see, something that fit what he needed from a relationship. The woman who made his life make sense, who cared about meaningful things, who was present with him in a way that felt like a reflection of who he wanted to be. He wasn't performing the attention, it was real, but it was real the way a projection can be real. He was loving what he needed you to be, not who you actually were underneath it. Jenna's voice was very quiet. I think he loved me. I don't think he was faking it. He wasn't faking. That's what makes it so confusing. He genuinely felt it. But what he felt was for the image. And you, the actual you with the hard weeks and the opinions about where to live and the needs that didn't always fit what he expected, you were always going to become more yourself. That was never going to stop. And at some point, the real you and the image he needed became too different to hold together. And when that happened, he didn't adjust the image, he withdrew it. Not consciously, not like a decision he made. The projection just dissolved, not from you personally, from the idea of you that he had needed. And now he's looking, maybe without even knowing he's looking, for somewhere new to put it. Jenna was very still on the call. She thought about Emma from the team, the unburdened smile at the eggs, the 2 mentions in one morning, the ease with which Connor had talked about her, the particular lightness of a person who hadn't yet been disappointed by the distance between the image and the real. She thought about Thursday night, Connor's open, caring face, the way he had said, "You've been really hard to be around lately," and the way she had immediately thought, "It's true. I have been. I need to fix this." He had put the failure on her. He couldn't say, "You're not who I needed you to be." That is not a sentence you can say out loud. So he had said, "You've been hard to be around," which invited her to fix herself. She had apologized. She had promised to be more present. She had tried more urgently to become the image he was already withdrawing from. So it wasn't that I changed. It's that the image couldn't hold. You didn't change. You were always going to become more yourself. That's not a flaw. That's just being a person. And the image he needed required you to stay a certain way. That was never going to work. Not because of anything you did, because the image was never really you to begin with. And the things, the dinner, Emma, Thursday, the signs. 3 weeks before Marco moved out, I had the same ones. The phone at the table, the name I heard twice in 1 week that changed the air when he said it. The night he told me I'd been really closed off lately, and I spent the whole next week trying to be more open. Jenna said nothing. She was somewhere in the middle of understanding something, and the middle of understanding something is very quiet. You're not crazy. What you noticed, the stopping mid-sentence, Emma, Thursday, that was all real. You were not reading into anything. You were reading it correctly and then talking yourself out of it because the alternative was too hard to look at directly. Yeah. Silence. Not an awkward one. "How are you right now?" Andrea asked. I don't know. I thought I'd feel more upset. I feel kind of calm, like something got heavy and then lighter because I finally picked it up. That's what clarity feels like. It's not happy, but it's not the same as sad. It's just real. Jenna thought about the relief in the room when patients finally heard themselves describe what the body had been saying for weeks. The relief was not because the injury was gone. It was because the signal had been heard. "What do I do?" Andrea did not answer immediately. When she did, it was not from theory. You don't try to fix it. Fixing it means becoming the image again, and you can't do that. Not sustainably, not for long. You've already spent months trying, without knowing that's what you were doing. What you do now is figure out what you actually want, not what you can save, what you want. Jenna sat with that. "I don't think I can figure that out tonight." "You don't have to figure it out tonight. Tonight you just know what you know." She looked at the window. The May light in Denver was doing the long evening thing, finally going around 8:30, slowly, like it didn't want to leave. The apartment was the same apartment. The couch, the painting Connor had picked out in year 2 that she had never entirely loved. The particular quality of light in this room she had lived in for 2 years. Everything was the same. She was not. She did not sleep easily that Sunday night either, but differently, not the restless circling of someone trying not to think, but the slow settling of someone who has finally put something down after carrying it a long time without naming what it was. Connor was home that night. They were in the apartment together, mostly silent, and she noticed something. She was not trying, not in the way she had been trying for months. She was not monitoring the silence, not calibrating her presence against what she thought he needed. She was just there reading her book. He did not notice. That, she thought, was data. Monday at the clinic was a full load. 5 before noon, 2 in the afternoon, she had agreed to cover. She arrived at 7:35 and moved through the morning with a different quality of attention than she'd had in recent weeks. It was not that she felt better exactly, it was that she was somewhere she recognized. This was her work. These were the rooms she was good in. Tyler Chen, who was making measurable progress. The woman who came in every Monday and always brought wrapped candy to reception. The afternoon patient, a man in his late 50s, post-surgery, beginning from close to zero. The quiet humility of starting over that she had always found, privately, moving. She was present with all of them, genuinely present, not performing attention, but actually there. This was not transformation. Nothing was resolved. But she had, somewhere in the last 48 hours, remembered something about herself that 8 weeks of accumulated weight had gradually obscured. She was good at this, genuinely good at it. And these rooms, this work, these particular skills belonged to her. Not to the version of her Connor had needed. To her. Denver, Colorado. A Wednesday morning in early June, 5:47 a.m. The kitchen was the particular dark of early morning. Not night, not day, the ambient light that comes from a city that never fully sleeps. Jenna was at the table with her coffee, two-handed, the way you hold something just to have it. Connor was asleep. She had been awake for 40 minutes without fully understanding why, and then she had gotten up because she had the sense that the apartment had something to say to her in this light, at this hour, and that she had been not quite listening for long enough. She counted backwards, 17 days since she had told Connor about a patient. Not because she had decided to stop. She had not woken up one morning and thought, I will stop sharing this part of myself with you. It had happened the way stopping happens when the body is smarter than the decision, gradually, without announcement, because some layer of her had understood, before she had words for it, that the telling had stopped landing anywhere it needed to land. She thought about the word Andrea had used, projection, the image he had needed her to be. Present, uncomplicated, the kind of person whose life enhanced his without requiring too much. She had tried to be that person, more urgently, even as the image was already dissolving. She had not understood, until very recently, that the dissolving had nothing to do with her. The projection ceases, Jung had written, when it becomes conscious. The narcissist never withdraws projections consciously. He redistributes them. He finds a new place to put them, a new surface that doesn't yet push back, a new person who doesn't yet know that the attention is for the image, not for them. Emma from the team, 2 weeks in Chicago if the account closed, built for that kind of thing. She held her coffee. She had not failed. The image had failed. The image had always been going to fail because it was built on a version of her that was going to keep becoming more real, more specific, more herself. And real, specific, fully herself was not what the image required. This was not in this moment a comfort. It was just a true thing. And true things, she had learned this week, were better than plausible explanations, even when the true things were harder. She had already started protecting herself before she had words for what she was protecting herself from. 17 days ago, some layer of her had simply stopped. The same layer that had known, in room 2 last Wednesday, that Tyler Chen's hamstring was asking for attention before it needed to shout. She picked up her phone. She opened her messages. She found Andrea's name. She typed, I think I'm ready to talk about what to do next. She looked at the message. She sent it. 5:49 a.m. The kitchen was the same kitchen. The early light was doing the Denver thing, thin and blue and full of altitude. Connor was asleep down the hall. In 6 hours, she would be in room 2 with a patient who needed to learn to hear what the body says before the body needs to shout. She was already listening.